a wet road, one loud break, and a millionaire who hadn't cried in years, kneeling beside a dog he thought he'd killed. Shane Palmer wasn't supposed to be driving himself that night. He wasn't supposed to care. But when a stray ran into the street and everything stopped, he panicked, picked up the bleeding animal, and drove through the rain until he found the only vet clinic with its lights still on. He didn't know a girl like Faith Sully would be inside. He didn't know she volunteered there after midnight because no one else would. And he didn't know that her hands, steady, gentle, covered in fur and hope, would change not only the dog's life, but his too. Because the truth is, Shane Palmer didn't just save a dog that night. The dog and the girl saved him right back. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. Shane Palmer wasn't supposed to be on that road. Not alone. Not behind the wheel. Not in the pouring rain with no driver, no assistant, and no reason to care what happened outside his tinted windows. But sometimes the quietest detours become the loudest turning points. He'd left early. Some black tie gala in a hotel ballroom filled with champagne smiles and empty conversations. His name had been on the banner, his company's logo etched into crystal glasses, but the whole thing felt like noise. Too many handshakes, too many shallow compliments, too many people pretending kindness while checking their watches. He'd walked out without telling anyone, loosened his tie, took the side exit, told his driver he'd walk to clear his head. And then it started to rain. By the time he got to the parking lot, he was soaked through. He slid into the back of a sleek black SUV, told the driver to go home, and moved to the front seat himself. He hadn't driven in weeks, maybe months, but it felt good grounding even to grip the wheel and pull out into the night. He didn't expect the dog. No one ever does. It darted out from between two trash bins near an alley, a blur of wet fur and wild panic. Shane slammed the brakes, heart in his throat, tires screeching through water. A dull thud, a yelp, then silence. He sat frozen for a second, palms glued to the wheel, eyes wide and unblinking. Then, without thinking, he opened the door and ran into the rain. The dog was small, brown and white, a mutt clearly, mud-covered, soaked, limp, but breathing. Shane dropped to his knees beside it. His expensive coat fell into the puddles. His cufflinks clinked against the asphalt as he reached out, unsure how to touch something so broken. The dog twitched. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." He wrapped the animal in his jacket and lifted it carefully, cradling it against his chest like a child. It whimpered once, barely, and then went still again. He didn't think about where to go. He just drove. The wipers barely kept up with the rain. The city lights blurred into lines. His knuckles were white against the steering wheel as the dog's fur soaked through his shirt. He searched his phone with shaking fingers. 24-hour veterinary clinic near me. Only one came up. Hopewell Animal Urgent Care, 5 blocks away. He didn't bother with parking. Left the hazard lights blinking and bolted inside, carrying the limp body in his arms. A chime above the door. The sterile smell of antiseptic. A sleepy receptionist barely looked up. "I hit a dog," Shane gasped. "He's alive. But, please, he's not moving." That's when she appeared. From the back hallway, hair tied up, scrubs wrinkled, hands still damp from washing. She looked young, tired, determined. Faith Sully had worked the midnight shift for 6 months. She wasn't a vet yet, still finishing school, still chasing scholarships, but she'd seen enough emergency cases to know when a life was hanging by a thread. Her eyes dropped to the dog, then to Shane's soaked shirt, then back to the dog. "Follow me," she said, voice clipped. "Now." They moved fast. She cleared a table, grabbed gloves, issued commands without pausing. He obeyed like a soldier. "Pulse faint but present," she muttered, pressing against the dog's chest. "Breathing shallow, possible broken ribs, laceration near the hind leg. Could be internal bleeding. Can he be saved?" Shane asked. She didn't answer, just worked. He stood uselessly nearby, hands twitching, clothes dripping. He hadn't felt this helpless since his sister's funeral. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was only 23 minutes, Faith looked up. "He's stable. For now." Shane let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He swayed slightly, gripping the edge of the counter. Faith pulled off her gloves. "You should sit." "I'm fine. You're white as a sheet." "I said I'm fine." She looked at him, really looked. Not the way reporters or board members did. Not like a commodity. More like a person who'd walked in from a storm, carrying the weight of something he couldn't name. "What's your name?" she asked. He hesitated. "Shane." "Last name." He paused again. She tilted her head. "Are you one of those guys who thinks I'll Google you?" He blinked. "Would you?" "Not unless you give me a reason." He nodded slowly. "Palmer." Her eyebrows lifted a millimeter, but she said nothing. "Yours?" he asked. "Faith." "That's fitting." She didn't smile. "Not really." They were quiet for a minute. Then she said, "You stayed." "What?" "Most people would have run. Claimed they didn't see it. Said it wasn't their fault." "I couldn't." "Good." Another pause. "I need to keep him overnight," she said. "There's no vet here until morning, but I'll monitor vitals and give fluids. You can come back tomorrow." "No. No. I'm not leaving him." Her eyes narrowed. "You realize it's a clinic, not a hotel. I'll sit on the floor." "Why?" Shane looked down. His voice softened. "Because I broke something, and I want to be here when it starts to heal." Faith studied him, then nodded once. "You can stay." She grabbed a towel and tossed it toward him. "Dry off. You're dripping on my charts." He caught it, surprised. Faith walked back toward the kennels without another word. Shane sat in the corner of the clinic, clothes damp, heart raw, jacket stained with blood and rain. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a CEO, or a man in control, or someone invincible. He just felt human. And somewhere in the back of the clinic, a small heartbeat kept going, because someone cared enough to stay. The rain had stopped by the time dawn broke, but Shane didn't notice. He hadn't slept. Not really. Just sat hunched on a cold metal chair in the far corner of the vet clinic, watching the slow rise and fall of the injured dog's chest through the cage bars. The room had quieted around 4 a.m. Faith had stopped giving instructions. The receptionist had clocked out. Even the flickering coffee machine had gone silent. But Shane stayed. His coat was draped over his lap like a forgotten suit of armor. His phone buzzed a few times. Texts from his assistant, emails about board meetings, a missed call from a news editor who probably wanted a quote about the gala he'd bailed on. He didn't answer any of them. He didn't care. All that mattered was that the dog Max, he'd decided, kept breathing. Faith returned around 6, still in scrubs. Her hair now loosely tied in a new messy bun. No makeup, no smile, just a tired sort of grace. "You're still here," she said softly. I said I wouldn't leave. She nodded, grabbing a clipboard. His vitals are holding. That's good. He'll need x-rays when the vet arrives. But the bleeding stopped. And he's resting. Shane stood and approached the kennel. Max stirred slightly, one paw twitching, then went still again. His face, scratched and bruised, looked impossibly small against the blanket Faith had tucked under his head. Thank you, Shane murmured, for everything. Faith didn't look up. It's my job. No, he said. It's more than that. She froze, then carefully replaced the clipboard. I'm not the only person who stays up all night for broken things, she said, walking past him. But not everyone chooses to. Shane turned to face her. Why do you? Faith hesitated. She poured herself a cup of lukewarm coffee from the pot she'd made hours ago. Then she stared into the steam for a long moment before answering. Because someone has to, she said. And most nights, no one else does. She sat down across from him at the small desk tucked near the break room doorway, motioned for him to do the same. He obeyed. Why were you out driving alone in that kind of weather? She asked. He ran a hand through his damp hair. I walked out of a gala. Rich people party? Something like that. She sipped her coffee. So what do you do? Besides save injured animals at 2 a.m. He looked at her. You really don't know? She shrugged. Should I? He smiled, not the charming CEO kind, the startled, genuine kind. I run a hospitality group, restaurants, hotels, some medical centers. Shane Palmer Holdings. Faith blinked. The Shane Palmer? He winced. Unfortunately, she studied him now. That's unexpected. In a good way? In a confusing way, she said honestly. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the low hum of fluorescent lights the only sound. Then Faith asked, Why did you name him Max? I didn't, Shane said. He just looked like one. She nodded, not challenging him. He leaned forward. Do you think he'll make it? I think he wants to, she said. And sometimes that's enough. The vet arrived around 7:30, an older woman with tired eyes and quick hands. She reviewed Faith's notes, nodded at the stability, and took Max in for imaging. Shane tried to wait in the lobby but ended up pacing like an expectant father. When the results came back, it was mixed news. A cracked rib, a bruised lung, a fractured leg that might require surgery. But the vet said his spirit was strong. The dog had survived worse than the accident. Malnutrition, neglect, and who knows what else. He's lucky, the vet said. Somebody clearly wants him to live. Shane didn't miss the way Faith glanced at him. He'll need care, the vet added. Rest, medication, time. I'll cover everything, Shane said without hesitation. Faith raised an eyebrow. Even the overnight fee? He smirked. Even that. They discharged Max later that day, with pain meds, a splint, and instructions Shane couldn't pronounce but promised to follow. You're taking him home? Faith asked as they stood outside the clinic. Shane hesitated. Should I not? She looked at him for a long moment, then crouched beside Max, who was now lying in a padded carrier in the back seat of Shane's car. You've got food? She asked. Yes. A warm place to sleep? Yes. A heart. He paused, trying to grow one. Faith gave him a tired smile. Then he'll be fine. She stood up and stepped back. Rain was starting again, soft and misty this time. Shane lingered. Do you work tomorrow? Every night this week. I might need help figuring out the meds. Faith crossed her arms. You have a phone? Yes. Then call. But only if it's for Max. He nodded, but something in his eyes, soft, unsure, said it might be for more than that. He drove away slowly, Max curled in the back seat, breathing evenly now. His penthouse had never held an animal before. No toys, no bowls, no understanding of how to comfort a living creature that wasn't impressed by stock options or wine pairings. But as Max shifted in the crate and let out a sigh, Shane whispered, "We'll figure it out." Back at the clinic, Faith stood in the rain, arms folded across her chest, watching the car disappear into traffic. She didn't know why she cared, but something about the way that man had held the broken dog in his arms, and the way he looked at her like she was the only one who mattered, left a mark. And she wasn't sure if it scared her or gave her hope. Max whimpered once as the elevator doors opened. Shane looked down at him, wrapped in a blanket in the carrier, big eyes glancing nervously around the spotless penthouse lobby, and for a moment he felt like an imposter. This place wasn't meant for dogs. It wasn't meant for warmth either. The floors were cold stone, the furniture designer-picked, the fridge full of catered preps labeled by day, not craving. There were no chew toys, no bowls, no squeaky distractions, no hint that anything alive had ever curled up on the floor just because it felt safe. And yet, when the elevator doors slid open to reveal the top floor, Shane bent down and whispered, "Welcome home, Max." He carried the crate in, placed it on the living room rug, and lowered himself to the floor beside it. His shirt was wrinkled, his shoes forgotten somewhere near the hallway, and his tie still lay in the back seat of the car. The version of Shane Palmer that the world knew, sharp, polished, distant, was nowhere in sight. Max licked his hand weakly. It was the first time the dog had moved on his own since the accident. Shane's chest tightened. He spent the next 3 hours Googling everything he didn't know. How to clean minor wounds, what to feed a dog on pain meds, how to make a DIY ramp for a fractured leg. He ignored phone calls, canceled meetings, told his assistant to reschedule everything indefinitely. By evening, Max had fallen asleep with his nose pressed gently against Shane's ankle. And Shane hadn't felt that kind of peace in years. The next night, Shane called the clinic. Faith picked up after the third ring. He could hear muffled barking in the background. "You again," she said. "You said to call if I had questions. You also said you'd feed him 3 times a day, not 5. He paused. "He looked hungry. He's going to get fat. He deserves it." She sighed. "Fine. What's the question? What kind of leash should I get?" "A sturdy one. Nylon or leather. Medium length. And he hates the crate." Faith chuckled. "Because he's not broken anymore." Shane smiled. "So, I can let him roam?" "Yeah, let him explore." A beat of silence. Then, quieter. "You're really doing this, huh?" "I think he's doing it for me." Faith didn't respond right away. Then she said, "You've got a good voice, you know." Shane blinked. "What?" "When you talk to him. I heard it at the clinic. You sound calm, gentle." He cleared his throat. "It's new. Well, it suits you." Another pause. "Are you working tonight?" he asked. "Every night," she replied. "Any chance you'd want to stop by sometime? Meet Max again." "Why?" He hesitated. "Because he misses you." There was a rustling on her end. A breath. Then softly, "Let me think about it." And she hung up. It was 4 nights later when Faith appeared in the lobby of his building. She wore jeans, a canvas jacket, and her hair in a loose braid. No makeup, no pretense. Just a dog toy in one hand and a worn-out tote slung over her shoulder. The doorman blinked at her like she didn't belong. But when Shane came down to meet her, he smiled like she was the only one who ever had. Max barked the moment she stepped into the apartment. A clumsy little hop toward her, his tail wagging despite the bandages. "You're not supposed to jump," she scolded gently, crouching to stroke his head. "But I'm glad you remember me." Shane stood behind her, uncertain. Faith looked around. "This is a lot," he offered. "Sterile," she replied, "but cleaner than I expected." "Thanks," she smirked. He led her to the couch. She sat carefully, watching Max wander toward the kitchen. Shane poured 2 glasses of water and joined her. "This isn't what I imagined," she said. "What did you imagine?" "I don't know. PR stunt. A good photo op, rich guy adopts injured dog to boost image." "Is that what you think this is?" Faith turned to him. "No, not anymore." They sat in silence, watching Max sniff at a plush turtle toy Shane had impulsively ordered from a pet site at 3 a.m. "He sleeps better when I leave the hallway light on," Shane said softly. "That's normal. He was probably outside at night a lot." "I didn't know dogs could have trauma." Faith glanced at him. "They can. So can people." Shane nodded. "I figured." She sipped her water. "Why are you really doing this, Shane?" He looked at her. "Because I needed to. Because he needed someone. And maybe I did too." Her expression softened. "You're good with him. You told me that before." "I meant it." Max trotted back to the living room and curled up between them. Faith smiled and leaned down to scratch behind his ears. Then she said, "You know what else he needs?" "What?" "A name." Shane blinked. "I thought Max fit." Faith tilted her head. "It does." Then she added, "But it sounds better when you say it." He met her eyes. There was a silence, the kind that carried weight but not pressure. And for the first time since she walked in, she didn't look like she was planning to leave quickly. Later, when she stood to go, Shane walked her to the door. Max limped behind, refusing to let her out of his sight. Faith bent down and kissed the dog on the head. "Heal fast, buddy." Then she looked up at Shane. "You too." And just like that, she was gone. But she left behind something he hadn't expected. Not just hope, but the sudden, impossible feeling that he didn't want her to be a visitor. He wanted her to be part of the home they were starting to build. Together. The days that followed were quieter. Not because the world slowed down, it didn't. Shane's company still sent him daily updates. His assistant left increasingly frustrated voicemails. The press kept speculating why one of the city's most visible CEOs had all but disappeared. But Shane didn't care. His mornings began with Max. Slow walks down side streets, warm coffee in hand, and the gentle sound of paws against pavement. The dog limped less now, tail wagging more confidently each time he spotted something new. Shane had even started carrying treats in his pocket, something no one in his previous life would have ever guessed about him. But the highlight of every day came in the form of a short text. From Faith. Sometimes it was clinical. "Don't forget his meds at 6. Other times, teasing. "Bet you forgot the leash again." Once, it was just a photo of a sleeping kitten in a cardboard box with the caption, "Someone dropped this off last night. Your boy would have tried to adopt it." Shane always replied, and sometimes she called instead. Their conversations were short, but charged with something unsaid. something that lived between the lines, that simmered quietly under the surface. He thought about asking her out, but every time he almost did, Max barked or spilled something or whined for attention, as if reminding Shane that love needed time, not impulse. Still, the thought lingered. And it wasn't just the thought. It was her laugh echoing in his kitchen when she stopped by with a bag of chew toys. It was the way she sat on the floor with Max, crisscrossed like a kid, her fingers tracing old scars on the dog's legs. It was how she didn't flinch when Shane offered her tea in hand-thrown mugs from his luxury collection. She just smiled and said, "These too fancy for dish soap?" He never laughed so freely before. But it all nearly crumbled when Faith saw the billboard. It was a Thursday. She had just finished a double shift and was carrying 2 heavy paper bags filled with donations for the reading center she sometimes volunteered at on weekends. The rain had stopped, the streets slick with reflections of yellow cabs and taillights. She was crossing near the financial district when something made her stop. A huge digital billboard, towering, sleek, polished, flashing images of fine dining, sleek hotel lobbies, luxury experiences. And then him, Shane Palmer, in a navy blue suit, looking directly at the camera. The ad said, "Palmer International, designing the world you deserve." Her breath caught. She stepped back, one hand tightening around the bag of books. He hadn't lied to her. He'd said his name. She knew he ran a few places, but she hadn't Googled him, hadn't connected the dots. Until now, he wasn't just some successful man. He was that man, the one who sat on magazine covers, gave TED Talks, signed billion-dollar deals. And for days, he'd let her believe he was just a guy with a dog and a slow smile and nowhere else to be. She walked the next 10 blocks without looking up, dropped off the donations, smiled politely, said nothing. Her phone buzzed once. Shane. Max finally figured out how to open the cabinet with the treats. "I might be in trouble." She didn't reply. That night, she sat on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by her things. Most of them secondhand, chipped or faded. Max's blanket still smelled faintly like him from the night she visited. She stared at her cracked phone screen, thumb hovering over his name, and she felt stupid. She wasn't angry that he was rich. She was angry because she liked him more when she didn't know. Shane didn't notice at first. Faith had always taken hours to respond. Sometimes she was mid-shift, sometimes asleep. He told himself it was normal. But by the 3rd day, without a single word, he knew something had changed. He paced his kitchen, tried calling once, then stopped. Left a voicemail. "Hey, I don't know what I did. Or maybe I do. But if I could fix it, I would. Call me when you can." She didn't, and Max noticed. He lay by the door more often, whined at night, refused to touch his favorite toy, the one she brought. Shane hated the silence. He could negotiate with governments, close 7-figure deals before lunch. But none of that helped when the only voice he wanted to hear had gone quiet. On the 5th day, he went to the clinic. Faith wasn't there. The receptionist gave him a tight-lipped smile and a shrug. "She's not on shift tonight. When is she back?" "She switched clinics," the woman said gently. "We're not sure where." Shane felt the floor shift beneath him. He left without another word. That night he sat in his office, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a skyline he once owned. And he did something he hadn't done in years. He wrote a letter. "Dear Faith, I could say I didn't tell you because I wanted to feel normal. I could say I didn't think it mattered. But the truth is I was scared. Scared you'd see my name and walk away. Scared that what we had would become another performance. I never lied. But I also didn't give you the whole truth. And I know that silence can be its own kind of betrayal. You and Max, you didn't just change my days. You changed me. I don't want to go back to the man I was before. But if I have to, I will carry that version of myself forward because of you. Because of what you gave me. I'm not asking for anything. But I'll wait. As long as it takes. Shane. He folded it. Slipped it into an envelope. Left it on his desk beside Max, who had curled into a tight circle, eyes half closed, tail still. Outside, the city moved on. But Shane didn't. Not yet. Faith didn't sleep the night she saw the billboard. She lay on her couch in the dark, one hand resting on her stomach, the other clenched around the edge of Max's old blanket, the one Shane had wrapped him in after the accident. Her phone had buzzed 3 times that day, all from Shane. She hadn't answered, and she hated herself for how much she wanted to. It wasn't about the money. Not really. She'd worked with rich people before, tended to their pampered pets, watched them toss $100 bills like spare change. She knew how detached they could be, but Shane hadn't felt like that. Until now. She replayed every moment, every look, every time he'd stood close to her and said nothing. Not a lie, but not the whole truth either. He'd let her feel safe, seen, equal. And now all she could think was, had she been something rare for him? Or just different enough to chase? She didn't tell anyone. Not her coworkers. Not her neighbor who sometimes watched stray cats with her. Not even the vet who first trained her. But Vince, a quiet kid who visited the reading center every week and once told her that grown-ups carry invisible backpacks, looked at her that Saturday and said, "You're not smiling anymore." She didn't have an answer. And then, on a rainy afternoon 2 days later, someone knocked on her door. She expected the building manager. Or maybe a delivery mix-up. She didn't expect Jules, the red-haired vet tech from Hopewell, the one who'd been there the night Shane brought Max in. She stood in the hallway, hair frizzed from the damp, holding a white envelope. "Hi. Sorry to just show up," Jules said. "This is probably weird." Faith blinked. "What are you doing here?" "I work part-time at one of Shane's clinics now," Jules said. "He didn't tell me to come. He just left this on the counter. No note, but he looked like hell. I figured you were the reason." Faith took the envelope slowly. Inside was the letter, and Max's first drawing. Faith sat down on the floor of her tiny kitchen and read the letter once. Then again, and again. When she looked up, her vision was blurry. She didn't cry. She didn't text him. But she went to Max's old box of things and pulled out the toy turtle he used to fall asleep with. She placed it on the kitchen table. Then she knocked on her little brother's door. "Hey," she whispered. "Remember the man with the dog?" He looked up from his comic book. "Yeah. He made a mistake. But I think he's sorry." The boy blinked. "Does he still want to come back?" She nodded. "I think so." "Then maybe we should help him." The next day, Shane didn't go to the office. He'd started avoiding it. Everything there reminded him of the version of himself he was trying to leave behind. The one with clean shoes, a full calendar, and no idea how to sit on the floor and wait for someone to heal. He walked Max around the block, then fed him lunch, which the dog barely touched. Shane sat beside him on the kitchen tile, scratching his ears. "I think she's really gone," he whispered. Max sighed, leaned into him, then padded quietly into the living room. A knock. Shane stood slowly, not expecting anyone. Maybe a package. Maybe the building manager. But when he opened the door, there she was. Faith stood in the hallway, holding a leash in one hand and a folded piece of paper in the other. Her coat was too thin for the wind, her boots still damp. Her hair was pulled back, eyes uncertain. And behind her stood a boy, no more than 10, with messy curls and a determined expression. "This is my brother," she said quietly. "He wanted to bring something." The boy stepped forward and held out the paper. Shane unfolded it carefully. It was a new drawing. 3 stick figures this time, one with spiky hair and a leash, one with a long ponytail and a stethoscope, and a small brown dog with big round eyes. In the corner, the boy had written, "You can come back." Shane blinked hard. Faith spoke first. "I don't know what this is, or what it's supposed to become." Shane nodded slowly. "Me neither. But I know I didn't imagine it," she added. "And I don't want to walk away from something real. Not again." He stepped aside, letting them in. Max bounded forward, tail wagging wildly, whining in recognition. The boy laughed and dropped to his knees to hug him. Faith smiled, small, tired, but real. Shane stepped closer, voice low. "I kept the letter because I didn't know what else to hold on to. I kept the blanket," she whispered. He reached for her hand, slow, cautious, like she might pull away. But she didn't. She let him hold it. No rush, no grand speech, just warmth, just presence. That night, Faith didn't leave right away. She stayed for tea, sat on the floor, watched Max fall asleep curled between the boy and Shane. And when Shane walked her to the door hours later, she paused. "You're not what I expected," she said. "I hope that's a good thing. It's a start." Then she kissed him on the cheek and whispered, "Tell Max I'll see him soon." And for the first time in a week, Shane let himself believe in second chances. Sunday morning smelled like pancakes. Faith had never pictured herself waking up in a penthouse, barefoot in a kitchen with a marble island and lighting that adjusted by voice. But here she was, sleeves rolled up, flipping pancakes in a pan she swore cost more than her entire rent. Behind her, Shane sat at the dining table with her little brother, helping him draw superheroes. Max was lying between them, half asleep, a plush turtle tucked under one paw. There were no cameras, no suits, no show, just laughter. Real, messy, imperfect laughter. Faith poured more batter and listened to the boy explain how his superhero, Captain Caffeine, could fly by drinking strong coffee and defeat villains using laser vision made of kindness. Shane chuckled. "And what's his weakness?" "Overthinking," the boy said seriously. Faith almost dropped the spatula from laughing. They ate together, talked about nothing important, dogs, cartoons, the strange weather. And when it was time to go, Shane offered to walk them home. Not because it was far, not because he was trying to impress her, but because something about walking beside her felt right. Faith let him. They didn't hold hands, didn't talk much. But halfway down the block, Shane stopped in front of a bookstore window. Inside, a small display featured children's books about animals. He pointed. "Want to go in?" Faith tilted her head. "You okay with reading about turtles and cats for an hour?" "I'm okay with reading anything if you're next to me." She didn't blush, didn't tease. She just opened the door. And together they walked inside. It became a rhythm after that. Not a routine that felt too fragile still, but a pattern. Some nights, Shane visited the clinic just to bring Max by. Some nights, Faith came over with dinner and stayed long enough to fall asleep on the couch. The boy always asked for 2 bedtime stories, and Shane always obliged. They didn't label anything, didn't need to, until the day everything nearly shattered again. Started small. Shane had to fly to Chicago for a 2-day meeting, his first trip since the accident. He left Max with Faith, promised he'd be back in 48 hours, and kissed her softly at the door. But on the second day, his face appeared in an article. Billionaire Palmer spotted with mystery woman. Sources say new romance could reshape brand. The photo was grainy, out of context, but it showed him walking with a client's wife after a dinner meeting. Faith saw it, didn't ask questions, just pulled away. Her replies slowed, her visits stopped, and when Shane finally returned, Max seemed to sense it before he did, pacing the hall, whining when no one knocked. Shane called. No answer. He texted, "I'm home. I miss you. Can we talk?" Nothing, until 3 nights later when a knock finally came. But it wasn't Faith. It was Jules, again, holding another envelope. "This time she left it with me," Jules said quietly. "Told me to give it to you if she didn't show up for the clinic shift tonight." Shane took it silently. Inside was a drawing. Captain Caffeine again. But this time the superhero stood alone. No dog, no girl, just him, holding an umbrella in the rain. And at the bottom, in a child's handwriting, "Even heroes get lonely." Shane didn't wait. He grabbed his coat, left Max with Jules, and ran down 5 blocks in the rain. Didn't call a car. Didn't care who saw him. He reached Faith's apartment breathless. Knocked once. She opened the door slowly. Hair messy. Eyes tired. "Hi," she said softly. "You saw the photo." "I did. It's not what it looked like." She nodded. "I know." He blinked. "You do. I Googled her. She's married to the Chicago client." Relief flooded him. Then confusion. Then why? Faith stepped back, letting him in. "I wasn't mad," she said, closing the door behind him. "I was scared." He turned to her. "Of what?" She looked down. "Of falling in love with someone who lives in a world where I'll always feel like a visitor." Silence. Then, "I don't want to be the girl you remember. I want to be the one you stay with." Shane crossed the room, took her hand. "You're not a visitor, Faith. You're the reason this place started to feel like home." She blinked fast. "I'm not asking for forever," he said. "Just tomorrow, and the day after, and maybe the rest we can figure out." Her voice trembled. "I don't know how to trust this." "Then start small," he whispered. "Start with tonight." She nodded, and when he pulled her into his arms, she didn't resist, didn't hold back. And the superhero inside her, the one who stitched up broken animals and guarded her heart like a secret, finally let someone hold the soft parts. Just for a while. Just enough. To begin again. Snow came early that year. Not the thick storybook kind. Just a light dusting, barely clinging to car roofs and crooked fences, softening the edges of the city for a moment. Shane stood by the window in his living room, coffee in one hand, watching flakes settle across the skyline. Behind him, Faith moved quietly through the kitchen. She was humming, something low and familiar, probably from the radio station she always left playing at night. Max padded between them, tail wagging as he followed the scent of scrambled eggs. The boy, her brother, had fallen asleep on the couch with a half-finished drawing in his lap. A superhero family this time. The girl with the stethoscope, the man with a mug of coffee, the dog with a red cape. Shane looked over at her. "He's added a cat now," Faith grinned. He thinks Max needs a sidekick. Shane took a slow sip of coffee. He's not wrong. Faith glanced at the boy and lowered her voice. He also said we should adopt you. Shane raised an eyebrow. Me? Yeah. But only if you agree to eat cereal for dinner once a week and let him name your next business Captain Caffeine Incorporated. Shane chuckled. It's tempting. Faith leaned on the counter, watching him with a softness that still surprised her sometimes. They didn't live together, not officially, but the lines had blurred. Her toothbrush was beside his, her books on his shelves, his coat hung by her door, and Max had 2 beds now, one at each place, though he preferred whichever one was closest to them. They'd started doing things together. Groceries, walks, quiet evenings curled up watching documentaries they both talked over. No grand announcements, just a quiet choosing day after day, until the invitation came. A gala, another one. This time it was personal, a fundraiser for the Animal Rescue Foundation Shane had started in Max's name. Faith's name was printed on the invite too. Gold foil, thick cardstock, elegant lettering, and she froze when she saw it. "What is this?" she asked. "A thank you," he said, "and a way to help more strays like Max." She read the text again. "But this is your world." "Our world," he corrected. She looked at him. "Are you sure?" "Only if you come." Faith stared at the envelope a long time. She didn't say yes, but she didn't say no either. The night of the gala, Shane wore the same navy suit from the billboard. Not because he wanted to look the part, but because she once said it made him look accidentally honest. He waited by the car. Max watched from the lobby, now strong enough to stand for longer than 10 minutes. And when Faith stepped out of the elevator, he forgot how to breathe. She wasn't in a gown, just a simple navy dress, her hair loosely pinned, a bracelet that caught the light when she walked. But it was the look in her eyes that stopped him. Unsteady, vulnerable, fierce. "Still time to change your mind," he said gently. "I already did," she replied. "That's why I'm here." He opened the door. She got in. The gala was everything Faith had feared. Towering centerpieces, crystal chandeliers, people speaking in half-laughs, waiters who offered napkins before drinks, eyes that lingered too long on her shoes. But Shane stayed close, his hand brushing hers, his shoulder always angled toward her. And when a donor asked with forced politeness, "So, how did you two meet?" Faith didn't flinch. She said, "He hit a dog." The table went silent. Then Shane added, "She saved us both." Laughter broke the tension. Someone raised a toast. And just like that, the ice cracked. Faith smiled. She didn't speak much that night. But when Shane gave his short speech, thanking the donors, honoring rescue staff, and announcing a new scholarship program for vet tech students, he looked straight at her when he said, "Sometimes it only takes one small act of kindness to rescue something much bigger than a stray dog." Her throat tightened. When the speech ended, he returned to the table. "You okay?" he whispered. She nodded. "I'm just not used to being seen like that." He took her hand. "You should be." They left early, not because of discomfort, but because the real celebration wasn't happening in a ballroom. It happened later that night, back at Shane's place. The 3 of them sat on the floor in pajamas, eating leftover cake with spoons and letting Max lick the frosting when no one was looking. The boy drew again, this time a superhero without a cape. Just jeans, scrubs, a quiet smile. Faith looked over his shoulder. "Who's that?" He grinned. You. She rolled her eyes. I don't wear a cape. You don't need one, he said. You fix things. She glanced at Shane. He was already looking at her. Later, when the boy fell asleep, Max curled by his feet, and the TV played soft background noise, Shane turned to Faith and whispered, "Stay tonight." She hesitated, not because she didn't want to, but because something in her had never stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. "I don't need you to promise anything," Shane said. "I just want you here." She nodded, took his hand, and in that moment something settled. Not solved, not perfect, but steady, real. Exactly what love looks like when it's earned. Spring arrived quietly, not with fanfare or fireworks, just earlier sunrises, softer evenings, and tulips blooming beside sidewalks still marked by winter's wear. In the small park near Faith's building, Max chased leaves while the boy climbed monkey bars in a hoodie 3 sizes too big and boots that still squeaked from last week's puddles. Shane sat on the bench, elbows on his knees, watching it all. Faith was beside him, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled up, a coffee cup in hand. She leaned into him just enough to say, "This is ours." They weren't married. They weren't engaged. There had been no diamond, no dramatic proposal. Just space. Space to grow, to blend, to learn how to fold one life gently into another. After the gala, Faith had started staying over more often. Max's crate was replaced with a dog bed by the couch. The boy had his own toothbrush in the guest bathroom. Shane had begun clearing his schedule for evenings that matter, as he once put it, which now meant school projects, dog walks, and bad movie nights that ended with all 3 of them asleep on the same couch. One weekend, they went to the shelter where Max had been found. The staff remembered him, remembered her. They didn't recognize Shane. He liked it that way. They adopted another dog that day, an older one with tired eyes and a limp not unlike Max's early days. Faith named her Daisy. Max, after a single sniff and one cautious tail wag, approved. The dogs became inseparable. So did the people. One evening, as the light faded through the windows of Shane's apartment, the boy sat at the kitchen table drawing again. His latest masterpiece. A small house with a garden, 2 dogs, a swing, a woman with a stethoscope, a man in a hoodie, a sign on the door that said, "Home." Faith leaned over his shoulder. "What's this?" "Our team," he said. She smiled. Later that night, after the boy was asleep and the dogs curled up in their usual spots, Shane poured 2 mugs of tea and handed one to her. She took it, wrapping both hands around the warmth, her eyes meeting his across the kitchen island. "I used to think love was something other people got," she said quietly. "People with money, people with perfect lives." He tilted his head. "You still think that?" She shook her head. "No. I think love is what happens when you stop running." Shane stepped around the island and reached for her hand. "I was never running. Not once I found you." She leaned into him, forehead against his chest. "You remember the night we met?" "I remember everything. I didn't think you'd stay." "I didn't either." They stood like that for a long time. No music, no speeches, just the quiet rhythm of breathing and the soft snore of 2 content dogs. A month later, Shane handed Faith a small, ordinary envelope. No fanfare, no bow. Inside, a set of papers, ownership documents, not for a ring, not for a car, not even for the penthouse, for a building, brick, weathered, full of light. He looked at her. "It's a clinic now, but it could be more." Faith blinked. More. A place where people like you can help dogs like Max. A place where no one gets turned away because they're poor. A place that runs because kindness should be policy, not charity. She stared at the papers. You're giving me a building? No, he said. I'm giving us a future. She swallowed hard. I don't know how to run a place like that. You didn't know how to patch up a millionaire in a blood-stained shirt either, he said softly. But you did. She laughed through tears. You're a dangerous man, Shane Palmer. I used to be. Faith kissed him. No applause. No headlines. Just the feeling of a door unlocking from the inside. 6 months later, the clinic opened. Max cut the ribbon, or rather chewed it in half while everyone clapped. Faith wore scrubs and muddy shoes. Shane wore jeans and a t-shirt that said adopt, don't shop. The boy handed out lemonade in paper cups and told everyone that superheroes didn't need capes. Just someone to believe in them. They named the clinic Captain's Place, in honor of the drawing that started it all, of the dog who led them home, and of the girl who showed a man with everything that he still had something left to give. Because love doesn't always arrive in diamonds or fireworks. Sometimes it arrives in the shape of a broken dog, a warm blanket, a drawing held in small hands, and the quiet decision to stay together, for good, for real, for home.